Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of My Favorite Product. This is going to be a good one. We've got Cabril DeAbreu here today. Hey Cabril,
Hey, how are you doing?
doing great. Thank you so much. We haven't met, so this is our first encounter. Really excited to meet you and hear about your favorite product.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is definitely going to be a fun session. Surprised that you may not have heard of what I'm going to kind of walk through today. So pretty excited
I,
about that.
the more of these I do, the more I feel like I'm out of touch with I like to think of myself as a software product person, but like last time was ClickUp, and I never heard of that one, and yours is new, so maybe it's good. I don't know if this shouldn't just be for me, but maybe it's keeping me up to date on all the newest, coolest products out there.
Yeah, that's what happens when you download anything like I do. You come across some really cool things.
Yeah, I'm on this pattern, I guess, where I'm downloading or starting new trials. I'm not going to name names, but some of these user experiences are just awful for these free trials, and I'm like, maybe you shouldn't start with a free trial. Maybe you should start with being a little more sales led or whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
I
I don't know if
think
you've
I
come across
think
those.
I think my thing now is like people are I think taking MVP a little bit too much to heart. I think
Yeah,
you should get to like a minimally likable product, not just something that, people might come across and be like, this might be a good idea if it was good. I think you should actually maybe make it a little good and then see if people actually like it instead of just making a thing.
you're already adding value here. You already got some new brands we can think about. I like that minimum likable product. And you help out a lot of smaller companies. It sounds like. Would you want to tell us a little bit more about your background, Gabriel?
Yeah, sure. So, I started out like a lot of people who want to break into tech, working at really big enterprise level companies, and then started slowly trickling my way slower and slower. Left New York City, took a venture capital job for a while, left New York City, and came to a smaller town. So I'm in Huntsville, Alabama now, and what I typically do now is help smaller startups kind of figure out what their relationship is with executives to software engineering to actually build the thing that works well and people like without losing all your engineers in the process. So that's a lot of what I do now, and yeah, just kind of consulting those smaller companies, helping them figure out their way, and it's been a pretty enjoyable process.
So that's a really interesting kind of position, right? So you're helping specifically engineers, what product teams communicate with executives, or how does
So
that work?
what I've noticed is typically when you go to early stage startups, what happens is the head of product, the visionary is usually that chief executive, but they
Yeah,
have demands that don't always align with what engineering is actually capable of, So especially if you're not coming from a technical background. So what I typically do is I'll fit in those places where I tend to be a lot more technical than your average CEO, but I'm, not saying that I can replace your software engineering team, but I go in there and I kind of lay that foundation where it's like, hey, let's not think about things in terms of timelines, but let's think about them in terms of difficulty. Let's think about what we actually want to deliver. Let's prioritize better. And that's not, we have to listen to the customer, but the customer doesn't direct. Kind of setting those footholds so that way, your executive team can create foster a better relationship with their engineers, understand what the reasonable expectations are, and actually get to a point where you're delivering things. A lot of these environments I come into a place where delivery timelines have stagnated, or they were like, we were supposed to deliver this 5 months ago and we have nothing. And a lot of those reasons are because of those unrealistic expectations, those shifting priorities. So I go in and kind of clean a lot of that up, make it really clean and crisp. So that way the engineering team can kind of just go to like a true agile setup and actually start to build things that, you know, can be tested, can actually touch customers, and you can actually get results against. And usually it happens a lot quicker than the 6 months that they were building nothing, or a
yeah.
year or whatever I come in there for.
Engineers must love you. You come
Uh,
in, you're helping, manage expectations and almost protect them. I'm guessing in a sense.
yeah, I'm the Robin Hood of the engineering team, kind of so to speak, right? They're like, oh, finally somebody comes in, and usually CEOs are like, I can't stand you, but you're right, and I'm like, yeah, listen, I'm just here to kind of make sure things work. I'm not necessarily here to be your best friend. But
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask you now if I can use that in the description. That Cabril, the Robin Hood of engineering teams, is here on my favorite product.
I like
Um,
it.
It's exciting. Yeah. Okay. So we've teased it a little bit here. Without further ado, what's your favorite product?
So what I've been using a lot most recently is this product called Yuka. And what Yuka does is it takes things that you might buy at a grocery store or cosmetics or lotions or foods, and it scans them and lets you know what's actually in them and what it does to your body. So you can kind of like scan like I don't know, your favorite bag of chips, and it'll tell you, hey, all these things have been shown to cause these issues in these places, just as a FYI. And then what it does is it'll give you recommendations for things that are probably better for you. So you can say, hey, if you really want granola, maybe don't use this one, but this one's a lot better. And
Oh,
I really like it. It's kind of been something that I used it first as a toy. I was like, oh, this is fun. Let me scan these things. And what I found is actually start to impact my shopping habits. So a lot of things that I would have normally bought, I'm like, oh, this is not good for my skin, or this is actually has something in it that may cause issues down the line, or this actually has too much sodium for me to eat. And I think that it's actually had a beneficial impact on just kind of like how I go through my day to day, my shopping habits, my eating habits. It's a pretty cool app.
it sounds it. That sounds like it's solving a big problem. I have this issue where I've recently gained some weight, and I realized that I've been snacking a lot on this popcorn called Skinny Pop.
Hmm.
And the more I think about it, I'm looking for these correlations. I'm like, maybe it's false advertising here because I'm not sure how good this stuff is. It tastes too good to be good for me. So I could probably use this app. So how are you using it? Are you using it in a store, product by product, or are there certain products where you'll take the app out?
So it kind of depends. So usually what I'll do is um, my partner and I, we've kind of gone through our cabinets for all the like cosmetic stuff nobody uses, or all the cosmetic stuff we swear by. We're like, this stuff is the greatest stuff ever. And I'm like, well, let's see if it's actually the greatest stuff ever, right? And then we'll scan it and we'll get like a 2. And I'm like, and it's on a 1 to 100 scale. So once we get to a 2, I'm kind of like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't be using this anymore. So it's kind of that's mostly been the case. I try not to go to the grocery store and scan everything I put in my cart now because that's a little excessive. But if there's something where I'm kind of like, should I get this one or this one? Right? It's
I
good
see.
for that decision right there because it's like, well, which one is better for me? And I'm like, all right, well, I'll get the better one because I was torn, right? So a lot of those indecisive moments, I think it helps clear those up quite a
So
bit.
it's
But
like
if
your
I was going to
tiebreaker.
get frosted flakes, I'm getting frosted flakes. I don't really care.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So same kind of thing.
your heart's set on it. Yeah. So it sounds like it's not just you mentioned like cosmetic products and food products. I mean, what's the range of different products it'll cover?
So it'll do cosmetics, it'll do food grade things as long as they're not like seasonings or sweeteners. So like if you scan sugar to see if sugar is good for you, of course sugar is just sugar. It's not really going to be able to tell you that something is too sweet if it's just sugar. But if you scanned Coca-Cola, for example, which is obviously probably not the best for you, it would tell you it's probably not the best for you because it's this over the recommended daily amount of sugar you should intake or something similar. So that's basically what you kind of would grade it out at.
Yeah, interesting. And are you? I'm just really curious about this product. I'm guessing there are certain things that matter to you or to anyone, right? That might not matter. It's almost like a weighted scorecard or a balanced scorecard, right? I care more about sugar, or, what it, like you said, what it does to the skin. Um, are you putting in preferences to help it arbitrate which product to buy?
So it actually doesn't a lot for that. It is very, very just like what you put in is what you get back. It's not going to really determine whether or not something is uh really important to you or not important to you. It doesn't really ask any questions. It doesn't do much profiling. It's just for the most part just going to scan things and then tell you whether or not it's good. They did recently add a pretty generic recommendations engine. So it would be like, this isn't good for you, but these things, which are similar, are. So that's I say one of the things that they recently added as an update recently that I was like, oh, that's helpful because before I was just kind of like, okay, now this is awful for me, but what do I substitute it with?
Yeah.
There's not,
What do I do now? Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Interesting. So, what was like your first experience with the app? Was it, did you find it by accident? Someone recommended it to you? And yeah, kind of what won you over with the app?
So it was one of those things that my girlfriend, she works in advertising, and she was like, somebody spoke to me about this thing. We should start using it. And I was, I'm very resistant to using things I don't find myself initially. I'm just kind of like, no. And she was
Yeah.
like, well, try it. So I tried it, and I was like, this is kind of cool. And I started to look into them a little bit more. I found out they were independently owned, which is kind of helpful for me, and they don't accept like money from brands to kind of boost their products. So they don't have any ads integrated in it. So I was like, okay, maybe I can use this because this can be maybe a little bit of a trusted source or give me some insight that I ordinarily didn't have. And I'm kind of the kind of person who, if you highlight something and you tell me this is bad for you, I'm going to be like, well, why? And one of the things that they have is if you click into like this particular ingredient is bad for you. You click into it, it'll tell you why, and then it'll give you a source for who told them that it was bad for you. So it's not like we made this up, we hate it. It's kind of like, hey, we found out that this ingredient has been determined to be bad for you. Here are the source of materials for proving that. So when I started to click through it a little bit more, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So that's how it started to get integrated a little bit more into my life. And like I said, I think it's a genius product. I think that there are
Mm.
things they of course could do a little better with, but I do think that like as a concept, it's really smart.
Yeah, we're going to get to the improvements in a minute as well. Is it all nutrition? I wonder if they could do more. Are they doing anything around like corporate social responsibility, or is it just mainly what's good for your body?
So for now, it's basically just ingredient based. So it's just telling you
Yeah,
from a nutritional value standpoint or from a ingredient based standpoint whether or not this is something that's going to impact you on your way to a balanced kind of like nutritional set. It doesn't really tell you, hey, these guys make great food, but they suck as people. So they don't really tell you that kind of information, though that would be compelling or interesting as well.
yeah. And I'm asking you all these very specific questions I don't usually ask guests, but I'm really curious. And maybe if you don't, that's okay. Uh, you know, I think all food products are required to have the label on the back with the ingredients. Is this sort of aggregating that data, or kind of highlighting the different parts of that data, or is it going a level deeper and saying you're not seeing this on the back of the label, but they're actually sourcing from different, sourcing their ingredients differently?
So I would say it's a higher level. Really, what it's doing is, for the most part, it's taking that label. We can all read the back of it, but when you usually read the first five ingredients on something, you're kind of like, I have no idea what that
Right.
is, but I'm assuming it's fine for me, right? And what they're telling you is, yeah, it is, or nah, it's actually not that great for you. And then you can kind of make the decisions. It also helps you look a little bit past the branding. I feel like when you look at a lot of brands, if they make their labels look really clean and then really, you're kind of like, this must be a really good thing. Look how clean and simple their label is. And they're kind of like, yeah, they're lying to you. It's not clean. The label is beautiful, but the ingredients aren't. So I do kind of appreciate that. I think there is a step forward, right? I think that there's a way that we can look at things to understand what those things that they're telling us are bad for them do inside that product and like what they could be substituted for as well, like what they could have used instead. I think that that's something that maybe as a brand they could kind of relate to some of those companies. Maybe that's an avenue for them to maybe generate a corporate avenue where they're like, hey, you're using this and we've determined it's bad, but here's what people typically are substituting that for if they want to improve their products that are getting these really low scores. So maybe that's something they could think about as well as they continue to grow. It could be a revenue source for them potentially.
Yeah.
Consulting almost.
Interesting idea. Yeah. All right. So let's get into that. What about the app kind of leaves you wanting more?
So my biggest problem is that the scores are a little vague, right? Because you'll get the bad, the poor, and it'll get to like decent, but decent or good. You can see some things with good, and they'll have like a 58. I'm like, well, 58's not good. Is it 58 for a reason? Is it, and I don't know whether they're, kind of just like, hey, some things will get a 58 and be good, and some things will get a 58 and be poor. So I don't really know what they're grading that against. Is it a weighted scale? Is it poor for its category? Is it good for, is it good, the best that you can get? And I think that maybe they can add that as a label, right? Best in category, best of its kind, something like that, where you're like, hey, this got a 60. It's not really the greatest score we can give, but it is the best in this category. You can't get
Yeah.
anything better
You're
than a
eating
60
unhealthy
right
food.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're eating the healthiest unhealthy food you can eat.
this is the best it gets, right? And I think that just something like that, which is like a simple label, it's like, hey, it's the best it gets. that would be something that would be like a great improvement, because now I'm just not kind of going back. If I go to scan a, let's say if we go into something that's cosmetic and I go to scan a soap and I'm like, oh, this soap got a 75. I'm not scanning everything in Target looking for 100, right? I'm just kind of like, oh, 75 is the best that's in here. This is the best it's going to get. I
Yeah.
guess I'll just get this 75 and I can move on with my life. So I think that's a thing. And I think the other problem that they have is just diving into cosmetics a little bit as well, is
Mm.
that they don't always categorize extraordinarily well. So they'll look up something and it'll have similar ingredients, but it'll be labeled for a different purpose or used in a different way. A great example would be my partner was looking for heat protectant for her hair. And the little I know about heat protectant was that we scanned one, didn't have a great grade, and they gave us some recommendations, but the things they recommended weren't also heat protectants. And I was like, well, yeah, this might be better for you, but it doesn't serve the purpose that I need it for. So either I have to get this really bad one, or you should recommend another heat protectant, right? So the fact that
Right.
you can't kind of subsegment or categorize or filter on those levels is something that I think would also be a great improvement. If it's like, hey, I only want to see other heat protectants. I don't want to see other things sold by the same company, maybe that are better, or other things that are good for
Yeah.
moisture, but not really protecting my hair from heat.
Yeah, that seems almost like a glaring problem. I mean, it's not helping you solve your problem by recommending a whole totally different product, right?
Right. So I'm still stuck getting what I was going to get in the first place, despite me now knowing that it's not good for me. So, right, what you added to me was a mental conundrum in addition to not giving me a solution. It's kind of like, yeah, that is an issue. And then you kind of walk away. So I don't know how helpful that is.
No, no, it's a good point. Um, it's funny too. I actually came across both of the things you just mentioned, starting with the first with context around analytics. Came up yesterday, so I'm working for a company doing licensing and customer insights, and we evaluate trials, and that's a future product we're going to be releasing to say Cabril's, in our product trial right now, and he's got a 23% chance of converting to a paid customer, right?
Hmm.
And like that information is valuable, but what we're learning now is people want to know why. People want to know,
Yep.
like, well, how is that different than other? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? If we had others that have converted, out of how many trialers, and also what makes up that 23%? Like, why are you
Right.
telling me that? So when you said that before about, yeah, tell me why that 54 is important and give me some more context, benchmarks, whatever you want to call it, it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And
I
I also
think
wonder, just with your experience with startups, you talked about categorizing the taxonomy of products and being able to recommend something in the same space. Do you think that if Yuka had started with just food or just cosmetics, they'd have a better chance? And I don't know, do you ever look at their app and go, why did you expand into all these products without getting it right on in kind of one product line first?
so. I think that the way they probably weighed it was, if we can deliver in these two spaces, we're really likely to cement ourselves in the category of most likely shoppers in the
Mm,
areas that we're thinking, right? So if you're thinking of a lot of these big box retail stores, right? If you're like, hey, we do food, right? You're gonna get some people who scan food, but you're also gonna get some people who are like, I don't care, right? But if you can kind of hit cosmetics as well, right? What you do is you're going to get a different category of people. You're going to get those people who are also shopping for food, but you're going to make them think about food now the same way they think about cosmetics, right? So if they're scanning their cosmetics, and they can turn around and say, I wonder what's in these Pop-Tarts, right? What you're going to do is you're going to get the people who are already using cosmetics to kind of trickle into that space. And there is more opportunity in that space. It's also easier to get it right in food.
yeah,
Cosmetics is a little tougher, right? Because there's so
yeah,
many things that are kind of like similar, but not the same. But a toaster strudel and a Pop-Tart, roughly the same, right? You can get that right. So I think
yeah,
that for them it was the opportunity cost. It's probably easier to do the food, but the impact in cosmetics, right? You're more likely to get somebody to really religiously use your app if they're thinking cosmetics and they want something clean, right? You're not as likely to switch a from your favorite food. if that's your favorite food, even if you find out it's not particularly great for you. Or you may have come into there assuming it wasn't great for you anyway, right? But with cosmetics, a lot of people are assuming now these things are free and clear and cruelty free, and they have all these like good things that are good for my skin and good for me. And people who are investing in cosmetics are investing a lot of money. So this just adds a research layer to them where they could kind of trickle over. So I can see why they did it in that way. Well, how would I have approached it? I probably would have focused on the cosmetics first. But again, it's harder. So I can see why they kind of are like, we'll do both and we'll just kind of see what happens. Um, they're not
Yeah,
awful at it.
that's a great answer, though. It's a good point, right? Expand your footprint, get people who, and I don't shop for cosmetics too often, as you might be able to tell. But you know, I don't know if that's as frequent as food shopping. So if you can hook someone on the cosmetic side, then also get them to use the app on the, for shopping for food, they might recommend it to someone else, right? Who only shops for food or whatever it might be. And you're getting more word of mouth out there than if you were to focus on a singular, category.
It's
Um,
kind of tangential when you think about it, like Pinterest. So Pinterest struggle was that they kind of built something that ended up being very gender specific, right? So like when you think about it, men can use Pinterest, but typically they don't, right? That's not their first go-to for things,
right.
right? Whereas it's typically become like a DIY housewife kind of thing. And if Yuka had gone exclusively into cosmetics, there's a good chance that they also would have gendered themselves very strongly. There are men who use cosmetics and focus on it, but it's also less likely for that to happen than if, somebody's wife was like, hey, you should use this app before you buy cereal for the kids, right? Then it gives
Yeah.
them an avenue to kind of keep it gender
Yeah.
neutral, hit a bigger group, have a bigger target market, and be able to create a bigger footprint initially than if they had just said we're gonna focus on makeup and
Yeah.
face creams.
Potentially double the market, right? And that's important. Great point. Okay. So in your work as a product leader, how has Yuka changed your thinking?
So one of the biggest things that I've pretty much figured out just using Yuka is that you don't to be a disruptor, you don't necessarily have to build the thing, right? You don't have to be a Glossier, which is like a big cosmetics brand that popped up. They're kind of creating a different way to look at cosmetics, and they were able to grow really rapidly. But you could also be the person who's determining what's in Glossier, right? Like you kind of can be the company that's deconstructing that other thing, right? And you see success in that to varying degrees, right? So you'll see things like Carfax, right, which is kind of an afterthought
Yeah.
now, but there was a point where Carfax was really novel and new, and it's kind of like, hey, we're not building cars and we're not doing inspections, but we're telling you if you got an inspection at scale. And it kind of makes you think of the opportunities in the in-between spaces, right? Maybe I don't have to build the thing, but I can build the thing to tell you if that thing is working. And that
Mhm.
is such a huge, I guess, understated market in a lot of avenues that people aren't touching yet, right? And you can think about that in healthcare, you can think about that in education, you can think about that in a bunch of different spaces that probably aren't being realized yet. One of my favorite tangential ideas was just something along the lines of working with non-technical founders, giving them something that sits on top of their back end and lets you know what the code is supposed to be doing. So it just
Yeah.
assesses that code and gives you a little summary. Here's what this does. And I think something like that, right? I'm not telling you, I'm not coding for you, but I'm telling you if your code does what you thought it does.
Right.
And I think that like things like that are just like spaces that Yuga opens up your mind to thinking about that ordinarily aren't things that you might consider.
I love it. It's not exactly the same, but it reminds me of Scott Galloway. Says something along the lines of, if there's a gold rush, sell some shovels, instead of trying to go find the gold, sell the shovels that
Right,
allow people to go get the gold, something like that, right? Find those spaces of opportunity.
right. Build
Uh,
gold testers.
yeah, a gold tester. That's right. Make sure it's legitimate. Um, Very cool. Well, Cabril, this has been fascinating. I can't wait to go use the app now. I'm going to go run it across my closet in the pantry in a second. But thanks so much.
You might be upset at what you find.
I know. Maybe I shouldn't, right? Don't be careful. Thanks so much for being on. Anything, or where can folks go to find you?
LinkedIn is the probably the easiest place if you want to reach out to me. And my LinkedIn is like I almost like I worked at LinkedIn at one point in my life, which I did. So
Oh,
my
okay.
LinkedIn is whatever the LinkedIn normal is, but it's backslash Cabril. So if you just search my name, you'll find me.
Oh, can't get much
That's
easier
probably
than
the
that.
easiest way to connect with me.
Yeah, awesome. We'll post that that link too. And yeah, it was nice to meet you, and thanks so much for being on the show. And it was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Thanks again. Take care.